Hey, welcome to another podcast with Francis. Hi, Francis.
Oh, there's my hand. There it is.
Mr. Mo Thomas.
Hey, guys.
And me, TimODavis. So we like to talk about topics from the untethered soul and the wit and wisdom of Michael A. Singer. We belong to the Facebook group that supports that work and really explores it deeply. And today we have a topic that derives deeply from the base values of the untethered soul and all that really the teachings really spin around this. And it's that knowledge and that understanding that we are not our thoughts. Mickey talks about that a lot. The metaphor that he likes to use is that inner roommate, right, from the untethered soul. And so here we are. We have thoughts, and they don't always prove to be helpful or supportive, but there they are. They come from our past. They come from our old traumas and some scars. So the question today is, when those thoughts really start to go, what do we do with them? How do we treat them? How do we sort of find strategies within ourselves to support our growth and allow them to be released as opposed to suppressed, maybe, is a good place to start. So with that, as always, I will go to the top of the mountain and ask Francis O'Connor to open the discussion.
Wow. Thank you. What a great topic. What a great topic. We have thoughts. Everybody has them. For many people, they're highly intrusive and highly destructive for some people. I would have, for a big chunk of my life, fallen into that part. I went through long periods of anxiety and depression, all stemming from a particular mode of thinking. What I didn't realize, thank you, Mickey Singer, was most of those habitual ways of thinking and behaving came from patterns that were instilled into me as a child by very well-meaning people who I find out later had the same thing instilled into them. Right? So my favorite analogy, I know you've heard me say it before, Tim and Mo, but if you take a computer and somebody programs it wrong, I give that simple example, 3 plus 3 equals 11, and somebody later on puts in 3 plus 3 and gets the answer 11 and starts screaming at the computer, this is wrong, this is not correct. The computer simply responds with, it is 100% correct because that's how I was programmed. That's what it feels like. And when we get to that point where you realize, oh my gosh, all this programming, all of these illusions, you start to see the illusionary component of this thinking. It then comes that second part of the question you asked him, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
So the first thing I learned, I still practice, believe me, on a daily basis, observation. I begin to notice the thought. What is that? Where's that coming from? And sometimes it's already gone beyond thought to emotion or feeling. So sometimes it's, okay, what am I feeling in my body? I'm agitated. I'm tight. What's behind that? What's the thinking? And usually it's me trying to get things my way. I don't like what's happening. Who does he think he is talking to me like that? And it's all just going on mentally. I could be looking at somebody and he has no idea I'm even thinking that. I'm like, who does this guy think he is anyway? It's just the spinning. When I get the opportunity just to observe and relax, Mickey Singer's great at relax and release. First part is just to relax what's going on. So I'd start there and see where you guys, obviously a lot to talk about here, but that's where I would immediately go.
That's a great way to start. Mo, what are your experiences?
When I first started with curiosity to explore the idea of neti neti, I am not, and then fill in the blank, thoughts were the first. And it was just a difficult hurdle to separate myself from the idea that I'm what I think. I think, therefore I am. This goes back way centuries in philosophy. And as an over analytical engineer type, even worse, to try to separate myself from my identity in thinking. So like Francis said, I've started to investigate the programming mechanism that something would happen. I would assign a meaning to it, and whether or not that meaning was good, I would have a good experience. If it was negative, I would have a negative experience. but the experience itself was neutral. And so I just started to stay with that and wonder why that happened, and staying with it long enough. I like the idea of the calm eye in the middle of the hurricane. Two things happen when you position yourself in the eye of a hurricane. First of all, it's a nice, calm, peaceful place of observation. You can see the things happening, not only around you, but inside your mind. The other thing about a hurricane is it tends to take away, divest the calm center of all of the things that were swirling. So in Wizard of Oz, that's a house and a cow. Those things are easily seen in the tornado or in the storm. But if you think about it, you can also see that swirl as divesting that calm center of your thoughts and emotions. It's almost like it's removing the programming, the filtering, the labeling that your mind automatically does when it views the world, or it views God, or it views ourselves. And so that and other metaphors like it, where I just positioned myself in that calm eye and stayed there to explore the experience, not to figure out what was happening, but just to notice. That for me was the start of what I now know is going to be a lifelong exploration of, if I'm not these things, then who am I?
You know, what I really love about that is you use the word notice, right? So that's awareness, but it also is non-judgmental awareness, right? Which is one of the key phrases that I've heard, all my life here at the temple, is the sense that as a yogi or an explorer, it's our job to be aware of what's going on, but to not have to judge it. And that eye of the hurricane idea makes that even possible, right? Because we're so, as you both have said, we're so programmed to add our little sense of right or wrong, good or bad. Is this taking me where I designed my life to go? Or is this going to, be a problem? And I love the willingness and ability to sense the things that are happening and just be okay with them, because that is the root of those intrusive thoughts, the thoughts. So the start of what to do with them is to kind of notice them, not judge them, and almost use them as learning. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. And I'd love Francis to take a shot at this, because the computer programming and operating system idea is a really good one.
Well, actually, when you come to the point where you begin to see it, we're on, but the observation part. And then that second question, okay, I'm very aware that there's a whole bunch of thinking patterns going on, and they affect me deeply, and they're affecting other people deeply. What do I do now? We've talked many times, Tim and Mo, about the sacred pause. I want to talk about that for a second, because awareness, noticing, example, my wife says something. I always go to my wife because we're here together 24/7. We both live and work in Dallas.
I think we need to bring her on someday.
We do need to bring her on next week.
Absolutely. We might need to duck if we bring her on.
I'm standing there, what, Carrie has no idea, and I'm getting agitated like, wow, I don't like the way she's looking at me, right? It could be something as silly as a particular way of looking or movement. What I've learned to do is when I feel the disturbance, if it's disturbed, I will remove myself. I'll come upstairs to my little den here. I call it putting Francis Patrick into timeout for a moment. So I come up here and sit, and okay, what's actually going on? There's the question. Who am I? What's really happening? Because once I ask that question, who's having the thought? Where's this coming from? Many, 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 many times I'm going to be like, you know what? That's a 5-year-old boy responding. That's how you responded to your dad. You were so hyper vigilant. I could tell from a movement, from the way a door was opened, from a particular leaning on a stairway. That's him. That's how hyper vigilant we can become.
Yeah.
So to do that then later on in life, when I went to a 12-step program called Adult Children of Dysfunctional Families, I realized, yeah, they're calling it adult children for a reason. Like I'm responding to my life as a 5-year-old. So the first part then is, this is not true. This is not who I am. It's a response that has built up over many, many years. And that sacred pause then affords me like, okay, how do I in my authentic self choose to respond now? Many times that's going back to my wife and saying, hey, I'm sorry. Here's what I just understood about myself. I responded to you from a little boy's approach. It felt like that within me, but I realize it's not me. And I'm sorry for doing that. And we have an agreement, both her and I, that we both do that. The good news is having somebody walking that path with you who has that awareness. The bad news is she's aware. And she can also say, yeah, hey, mister.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That the awareness that you talk about is just so central to this. And the sense, like, just of having the ability to pause in the midst of angst, darkness, anxiety, or conflict, right? And that you can take a breath. That's really evolved and beautiful. And I think that's a place we all need to work for. I want to raise another variety of that, which is, Mo, you talked about how as an engineer, you've been sort of maybe even conditioned for intense mental acuity for every situation, right? And I see that with a lot of entrepreneurs and all people from all walks of life, right? We've been conditioned that your mind is the tool, like it's the Swiss Army knife of all the things we have, like it's the way to solve everything. And I think what you're saying, Francis, is there's a sense that no, it's not. Like I can start to break that habit. But there are going to be times when you're going through something difficult and you are trying to solve a mental problem, and the thoughts come up. And sometimes they're useful, and sometimes, how do you sort of sift through that? Like you can get quiet for a minute and you start to notice it's still saying things, and it's like, well, gosh, that might be right. How do you work with that? You know what I'm talking about? Like you're lying awake at 4 a.m. and it's your mind is saying things, and that actually might be productive to write them down. Mo, how do you start to work with that?
I was talking to my little brother about this topic of who are we and who are we not. And he shared with me something he had read from Rupert Spira, that our mind has 3 functions, primary functions: measuring, comparing, and describing. Those 3 things. And a combination of all of those things, you can see the programming where we do that on autopilot in our subconscious. We do that before we even know that we're doing it. Right. So these things are instantaneous, almost instinctive at some point. And so the first thing might be just to put on the table the possibility that I am something deeper than that function of comparing, measuring, and describing. There's something true that's present to whatever's happening prior to that mechanism kicking into gear. If we can put that on the table as a possibility, then we start practicing and noticing the pause and the breath when any indicator in us starts rising, whether that's in our body, whether our mind starts racing and we're starting to get tense and we feel it. If we've already put on the table the possibility that we're deeper than what's going on, our pause can move us back, relax us back into that place. But if it's never been put on the table as a possibility, now when you think about it or when something comes up in your body, it's like trying to throw a rock into a ripple-filled pond to get rid of the ripples. Now you've created all kinds of interference patterns, and it's just going to be a mess, even worse of a mess than it was before. Can you sit with what's happening and let those ripples just die out on their own, come to the end of their energy, and just be still again? Yes, but it's a qualified yes. if there's something in me that's deeper than what's taking place.
Here's what I'd like to suggest, that for a lot of people, like, there's a rage of thoughts that are really scary. You know, it's the end of relationships. There's like businesses going bad, life and death, right? And at those times, you know, the survival instinct will kick up. And again, we go back to that tool of our mind that, you know, that's going to be the chief, you know, way we have of organizing our energy and thoughts. I wanted to share this. I love what you said, Mo, but I'm going to just say that that's a state that requires a lot of work, right? Like years to get to. And that's beautiful. I say, do that work. But like, here's the thing I heard, and I've actually experienced this, that there'll be times when I would be meditating and a problem at work, like a real legitimate problem come up. And somehow out of that, you know, swirling vortex of stuff, an actual real idea comes up. I gave myself the space in meditations. I would keep a pad of paper and a pencil next to me, and I would actually write things down and say, and just put that down as an idea to be explored. Because if I did it intentionally, then that's still awareness, right? Still done from a place of awareness. And sometimes we do get good ideas. I even heard it, and I have to check this, but I think it's true. Okay, I'll start with that the Dalai Lama does a meditation in which he actually uses that time to try to figure out logistical problems as he's trying to guide the whole, you know, Buddhist world. That there are times when he sits and uses that time actually to sort of, you know, scope his higher power, his higher influence, his deeper inspiration to find those ideas. And I like to propose that sometimes there are ideas, but it's, again, we have to go back to awareness. It's really easy to let our mind just spin. So being able to put a break in it, write an idea down, and then move on without spinning. That's my suggestion. At least that has helped me.
I'm 100% in agreement. I just think you described the fundamental difference between outside in living, which is our default, taking all of our inputs on what's coming in, versus inside out living, which is from the place of awareness through the mind and then into the world, drawing from that beautiful place of stillness and wholeness and creativity, all of those things. But we tend to do the opposite. We tend to let what's coming in drive us. It's all reactionary rather than inside out, like you described. So artists describe it all the time. That inspiration hits in that quiet time in the morning, 3 a.m., they're awake, and a beautiful song appears. Well, I think that's coming from the place of awareness and creativity. Francis, do you get that when you're doing your music? I'm guessing that you're familiar.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, so many times with no other agenda other than sitting down quietly at the piano to gain a sense of freedom. Because if you said the word inspiration, in spirit, to be inspired, to be in spirit. And I go back to Tim's for a moment. Mickey talks a lot about the lower and higher too, you know, lower mind, higher mind.
Yeah.
One of the things I started doing with issues, problems that needed solving, was a little technique that somebody taught me, I can't even remember who, but in a meditative state to drop it into what's called deep mind. Like you're dropping a situation into a deep well that just go and then leave it alone. If it comes back to you, then again. Here's a perfect example of how that. I had an issue with my dad, God rest his soul, who had a severe life of alcohol and violence and crazy stuff. And for most of my life, I just wanted to hear him say, I'm sorry. It never happened. And I wanted then at one point for my brothers and my sisters to hear it. And I kept praying for that. And then when I was told about the deep mind, I said, okay, I'm going to take that scenario and drop it into deep mind. And just as you described it, it took a while, but this sense came to me. And you can tell it's not from the thinking mind. You can tell the difference. It was go to your dad and tell him he's forgiven. The mind that created the disturbance in me was never going to come up with that. Never was going to come up with that. That came from that deeper well, that deeper mind, that inspired, that in spirit portion place. I got to do that before he passed away, and I'm so grateful because it left me at a place of peace and ease when he passed away. And my memory of him now is much more one of compassion and understanding that what happened to him was causation for how he behaved, the same as it was for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I see what you're saying. I not only see what you're saying, have experienced that, and still will do that. If something is like, I have a situation, family situation right now where it's going into deep mind, it's going down the well right now, literally every time. And the benefit of the meditative practice, we come to it from all sorts of different ways. People are doing it to relax. People are doing it to commune with God. But this particular one of just being in surrender, I take the scenario, whatever it is, I let go of it to universal mind. Let's use that word, to universal mind. Albert Einstein, I think about a problem 1,000 times. I get nowhere. I go for a walk and go quiet, and there it is. We're talking the same thing here.
Yeah. I used to do a process when I was a manager, and I would have my team and we would talk about some problem. I'd say, look, I don't want anybody to solve this, but I want just to find this problem. And on our next meeting, I bet we'll have a million different answers, and just like throw it out there and then just let it sit and come back to it and let that give space for the quiet mind to kick in. And I think that's a interesting practice.
Yeah. I love that Mickey Singer talks about the lower and higher mind. That was very helpful to me. Because initially you just think it's just this one crazy disruptive mind that's going on. But to be able to differentiate between that and the inspired in spirit place, yeah, it's important. It is for me, for sure.
One of the concepts that I found really helpful, it stems from a Meher Baba story where he talked about his mind was going. Mickey's told this story a number of times, but Meher Baba was doing something and his mind wouldn't stop. But he wrote a letter to all of his followers and said, dear loved ones, I've been through this situation. My mind is busy, but I can still fall into samadhi. And like, it's an amazing, samadhi is like this high state of bliss, right? So the mind doesn't stop per se. Like, we aren't really saying the mind has to stop, but the metaphor I like to use is turning down the volume when you're riding in the car with somebody and they have the stereo turned up too loud and it's just intrusive and terrible. You turn it down. And at some point you can start to hear your own mind instead of the speakers of the car. I have that experience internally, and just the ability to kind of, that's the ultimate, that is a way of surrender, is to surrender to the mind, to let it just do what it's doing. Let it have its space, but then to find peace underneath that. Have you guys tried to actually quiet that, like say, mind, shut up? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. When I first heard about meditation, it was one of the most frustrating things I'd ever attempted, because I was told you need to shut your mind off. And that's the ripples in the pond thing, trying to throw rocks to get rid of the ripples. But then to hear that meditation was simply putting yourself in the position to observe and notice what's coming up without doing anything with it, just to sit back in that seat of consciousness and witness what was coming up. That was a game changer when it came to the whole realm of meditation and contemplation. So my rescue was not to shut the mind off. It was simply to sit back and notice. And when that happens, the volume of what comes up tends to go down just in the noticing. So rather than focusing on it directly, just noticing tends to turn that volume way down so that we can get to that place.
It is where I love personal experience, because we're all coming to this with our own personal experience. I signed up to do a course to become a meditation mindfulness teacher, instructor. And the first week I'm like, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. Right? The task was to meditate in the morning for an hour, to meditate in the evening for an hour, and to write a report on the both meditations. So 4 days in, I'm like, no.
I'm broken. This is broken.
Oh my God. So what I did find helped And again, this is just a personal experience. If I put on some very quiet meditative music in the background, I could sit with it. I could sit with it. And then I realized when I was doing coaching later on, everybody was kind of struggling with that. And for many, many people, the thought of a 30-minute meditation was too much. 20-minute was too much. 10. I started pulling it back. I came up with a 60-second, 1-minute meditation because I knew no matter what's going on, we can do something for a 60-second that would appall us if we felt we had to keep it up.
Yeah.
And part of that, when you mentioned too, Tim, here's the process for me. I do this every day, but here's the process. If the mind is active, I will do the following. Okay, mind. Sometimes I'll call it Francis Patrick because when I was in trouble, my mom called me Francis Patrick. And here's the mind. I'm like, okay, Francis Patrick, you're here. I know you're here and you're kind of loud right now. So what I want you to do is for just 60 seconds, I want you to STFU. Simple. Just STFU for 60 seconds for 1 freaking minute. And I promise you, my attention will come right back to you after a minute. And even beyond that, if it's still frantic, I just start counting from 1 to 60. I didn't realize the importance of that too, because if you put your mind cannot be, your awareness even cannot be in two places. There's a whole other conversation about that. But for most people, that you can be in one place. It's that idea when I used to sit at my piano, nothing else was going on. For folks out there who are really struggling with mindfulness or meditation, I always like to tell my own truth about that. It's come down to many days for me, 60 seconds at a time. But once experienced, the quiet, it's pretty, for me, it was very dramatic. When I found myself in a quiet place where there's like, okay, there's very little happening right here. And my response to it was, wow, you know what? If this is what death is like, I'm okay. This is kind of sweet. This is nice. But then the danger is to go seeking, pull that back instead of do what Mo and you just spoke about.
Right. I love that, that it kind of starts with awareness, right? We've talked about that. And Mo, you mentioned when we become aware of the intrusive nature of our mind, then it starts to decrease. And it takes a long time. Like it's not like pushing a button. It may take quite a while depending upon how strong the thoughts are, but that's a great starting point. It's like the more we are aware of them, the more we see how non-helpful they are. It's like eating food and all of a sudden realizing it doesn't really taste that good and it's not making me feel good. So I'll slow the intake of whatever that thought is down. The other thing, the mini 1-minute meditations, Francis, Mickey talks about something very similar to that. And it became a life practice for me. And in the Untethered Wisdom, he talks about, just centering yourself every time you go through a door, you pick up a phone, that kind of thing. He used to give that teaching a long time ago. And what I found was just taking a breath every hour or 3 breaths and checking in that sense of anxiety that comes from thoughts or the building of energy that comes from thoughts and turns into a shitty day, if you will. It builds over time. And just that 1 minute done a few times a day tends to take the rise out of that and kind of flatten it out so that we don't get as far out of control. And we end the day, we're not quite as exhausted. We're not quite as worn out just because we're catching it early. We're catching it, in a simpler phase and relaxing through it, which is always easier. The other thing is, they're going to be emergency, break glass in case of emergency, the 911, and that would be mantra for me.
Yeah.
So the mantra is just repeating something, over and over again. And then certain meditation philosophies, you actually have a mantra, and the guiding principle is that it doesn't mean anything. So the repetition of this thing doesn't come with like some loaded meaning or take you to some thought or some, sort of energy state. It's almost like, forgive me, eating celery, right? It's just like, I'm hungry. I just want to chew on something. I'm going to chew on some celery. It's not going to be a lot of calories. The flavor here or there, depending upon how you see these things. But Yogananda had a great mantra. I can and I will. I can and I will. I can and I will. And if I found myself in a business setting where I was just like filled with doubt and fear, or even procrastination, I would just start saying, I can and I will, I can and I will. And it would crowd out the intrusive thinking of doubt, fear, and and difficulty that is so easy to get in today's world. There's so much bad news everywhere. Like turning on the radio, talking to people, we are inundated with bad news. So it's no wonder that the mind sort of adopts that pattern and that energy. So we need to find ways. So mantra is good, music is good. The other one I want to throw out is going for a walk. Gosh, it helps me so much just to break up the day, get a little, hard breathing going just to kind of break the energy of the internal cycle. But at the root of all of this, would it be safe to say it's self-awareness? It's just like the idea that you're watching yourself and learning about how you deal with things and building a steady practice over time.
Yes. Yeah. I just went for a walk before we came in here, actually, on that one.
Were you anticipating a stressful interaction with us?
Having a less interaction with boys. What's interesting, Tim, and I want to get to Mo then. Just this week, you've heard me talk about it, and so has Mo. I have a very large family, and there's a disturbance in the force field of the family right now, without me going into detail. The mantra has become very meaningful to me, and the mantra is a very simple one. I will just sit quietly and repeat, may my family be at peace. May my family be at peace. And you start to feel the vibration of that. And what was happening for me then, this sense of compassion and love coming in, and it will move on out into the force field of my family. I feel that strongly. So yeah, big fan of, not just a fan, big practitioner of mantra as well. Yeah.
I found it helpful to ask this provocative question: what are these thoughts made of? And sit with that. And the metaphor that's been helpful is, when I dream and I become the dreamed character in my dream, and I have this whole world and I'm interacting and I'm having thoughts and feelings are coming up and I've got relationships and time passes quickly. All of these replicate things in the real world, but in the dream state, I'm having all of these experiences. But the moment I wake up, I recognize that all of what I experienced was transient, was temporary, was all the activity of the mind. And so in waking life, as things start coming up and I start feeling stress, a mantra that's been helpful is, these thoughts have no substance on their own. These thoughts have no substance. It reminds me, just like in the dream state, these are all just activity of the mind. They don't have any independent, autonomous substance. And I can sit back and notice those things come up and away. And the same way that waking up from a dream, I recognize that was all just activity of the mind. The same thing when I sit back, relax back, I can just see those things for what they are. They're just little tiny vortexes of energy that come up. They can't get to me if I don't identify with them. And in a dream, anything that happens, of course, I'm not going to identify with those things. These are just my subconscious doing what it does in a dream. And even though it's so much harder, that's a helpful metaphor in the waking world, to realize they really don't have any control or power over me other than what I give it.
There's another aspect of that I find incredibly inspiring, which is that, Mickey talks a lot about relax and release. All the great teachers do that we get quiet inside, and that the foundation of our discomfort is an energy, not a thought, right? We have some scars, we have traumas, we have the memory of bad things that have happened to us that we've stored. And as those things come up, we feel uncomfortable, we feel pain, we feel sadness, whatever that is. And often thoughts are a manifestation of that energy, right? So when you have the awareness to breathe and relax in the midst of thoughts coming up, and I find it's especially, powerful at 4 a.m. when, that kind of thing is happening. They're kind of the smoke of this inner fire that's burning. And The smoke, the thoughts are the awareness that helps us to realize it's time to relax and release. And the thoughts start to become a sign, and relaxing with them allows the energy to come up and then to be dispersed, to be released.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a gradual process. It's a slow process. But I think it's important to not make an enemy of our thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Like I've heard people come away from some of Michael Singer's teachings and say, well, my mind is the enemy. And it's not at all. It's an amazing tool. It compares and it measures and it does all the things you talked about. But when it's out of control, it's like anything, like even the finest car, when it's out of control, is going to run people over and do crazy stuff. So
sure.
The sense of feeling the energy underneath them and relaxing through that is actually a really great way to use the power of relax and release on a constant basis.
Yeah, I would add one thing to that, Tim. When somebody's in disturbance, I'm going to, let's say, depression, anxiety, the more profound human experiences, it's not, I wouldn't say to that person, your mind is not your enemy, your mind is not your friend. But that's just as a starting point. Because in the beginning, I certainly had to realize that my mind was highly destructive. Because it was. Now, later on, I've come to see exactly what you're saying. So I'm just putting a little caveat on that. If you come across a person who's in a bad space mentally, the most effective thing I can possibly do is to sit and listen. Just sit and listen. Offer nothing at all. And because I remember for myself, those were the most profound moments for me. People who just sat with me. And when I realized that all of this was coming from old patterns, old beliefs, samskaras, old wounds and hurts, then at that point I could look and say, yeah, but there's that part of my mind that can sit it down at the piano and without any effort play this incredible music. So I'm just putting that little caveat there to,
yeah, that's a good one.
When we meet people, which we all do, and I'm just including myself in that, that was my own experience of it too. I had to look at my mind. I used to say to myself, yeah, this guy's not my friend. I had to go to that place first. But this was a mind that persuaded me that it was a really good idea for me to take my life. And that everybody would be better off if I did, including me. And I distinctly remember those kind of psychotic breaks, whatever you want to call them, or conversations going on within my mind that would be deemed insane. Because literally they were insane. So just to know that when that happens for another human being that I'm around, I want to remember what it was like when it came from there. But there does come a point where we begin to realize, yeah, that's that whole patterned response stuff that's going on. And yet right here, sitting right beside it is this incredible mind that's capable of all sorts of stuff. That's where lower mind, higher mind. That helps a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, Francis, I'm reminded that I used to take the words of Jesus, love your enemies, bless those that persecute you. I remember battling what we were taught were demonic forces. And the more you fought, the more strength you would give and the battles would increase. And I just, over the course of time, as I stayed in peace, more and more those battles got less and less and eventually disappeared. So now when I hear those words, love your enemies, I'm not looking at external forces or people. I'm also including my thoughts and emotions as they come up. Turn those perceived enemies within you into friends. See what they have for you. See what they're bringing up for you. And don't give them strength by warring against them. That just gives them more energy. Just notice and befriend and bring loving presence into that interaction. So Francis, in the same way that you listen with presence to those who are suffering, we can do that to our inner self as well. We can listen with loving awareness to what that mind is saying. And rather than squashing it or raging against it, lovingly bring our presence to it and see what it has to say for us. And eventually that noise tends to calm and peace starts to rise up. So that was a reframe for me.
I want to point something out that all these states do happen for people. It's worth the effort. And I want to say too that it takes, like, there'll be times when we do work and we do the process that you just described, Mo. We relax, we release, we open, and gradually the thoughts decrease. And you'll have a period of time where everything's beautiful and the mind seems great. And then out of the blue, another thing will get triggered and the mind will kick up again. And that's not going backwards. That's actually going deeper. Not sometimes. When we store things with pain, they come up with pain. That pain will trigger energy, and that energy turns into mind activity. So as we go deeper into our beings and discovering more of what's in there, that will continue to happen. And this isn't a one and done process. The thing that really matters is how we get better at releasing, right? Everything that we're talking about is part of our self-knowledge and self-wisdom. We know how to handle it within us. And it's really worth developing that within yourself, because Tim's got his way, Mo's got his way, Francis has his way, and everybody listening should have their own way. But it just takes some while. These basic techniques, meditation, mantra, walking, all these things, they open the door to making progress. And then you start to see what works and you become your own teacher. That's really the height of this, isn't it?
Tim, you said that we have this in us. That is a huge starting point to help each other realize that this wisdom, that this peace is already resident. It's not something that you have to go get from outside of you. There's a part of us that knows. That's profound, isn't it?
It is. It's really like the thing that we're looking for is that connection, that place, that connection with that quiet place that Francis talked about.
Yeah, the mountain too, Tim, that people climbing from north, south, east, and west, all coming up the mountain from different directions. And yet there's one guy running around the bottom shouting, "You're all going up the wrong way." I don't know what somebody else's way up the mountain, and they don't know what mine is. But that's the beautiful thing. We share our experiences of that. That's what good, because somebody will hear my story and like, oh my gosh, he knows that's exactly it. Or they'll hear Mo's story or Tim's story and identify with that. Now we really have an opportunity to be of service to each other. Because in my own case, it was, I'm not kidding when I say 40 years of seeking, as to the best of my ability, best I could, hundreds of books, different teachers, classes, mental institutions, psychologists, psychiatrists. It was the moment, and it came down to profound and deep surrender.
Wow.
The moment of really running out of resources, just shot. And it kind of was, for me, and again, I just speak for myself, that realization, more than a realization, it was kind of like saying to God, higher power, okay, dude, it's all yours. Because I just can't do it. Now, let's see how good you can do with it. It was kind of like, okay, pal, well, now let's see how good you are, But it was a surrender, and I had nothing to lose. And there are a lot of people who will have nothing to lose. There are people who, that analogy from those 12-step programs, you're coming down an escalator. There's 40 floors in that escalator. You can get off at 39. You can get off at 21. Some people are going to go all the way to the basement. That's just life on planet Earth. I went to the basement. Did I have to? No. But that's what happened. And it's okay if somebody has to go all the way to the basement. That's the experience for that human being. I don't know. And at some point we get to that. If we stay alive, I've had a lot of people died. I don't like saying that, but there's truth in that too. If we stay alive, we get to that point where we're like, okay, maybe there's something more. Just that, maybe there's something more.
Yeah. It's really amazing, Francis, isn't it? Go ahead, Mo.
You're saying there's no cut and paste formula that works for everyone the same way.
No.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, fellas, that's a really nice start with the mind. And it's a lifetime of getting to know that thing. It's amazing, how beautiful that the mind can be, that it can come up with music. Like you hear the most beautiful music or the most beautiful sculpture, or the most, amazing buildings and cities built by that mind. And then also that same mind is the mind that convinces people to do horrible things and take their own lives. So this work is worth it. And there's no big thing to do. It's about building a steady process of awareness and trusting it. And we don't have to do all the work at once, right? We can go step by step, release, relax, get up, feel where we are, and keep doing it every day, every day, every day. And that gradual improvement becomes the juice of life. It becomes the thing that really makes life, it puts the energy, it puts the spark. We don't have to be perfect, right, Francis? What do we have to be?
We do. Spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. Amen.
That's right. That's right.
I'll finish with this, Jim. It allows us to experience life in a whole different way. Last night I sat down, Carrie's out of town, and for over 2 hours I just listened to, I had it on TV, but I listened to really beautiful music, some classical music. I put on some beautiful folk music, which I love. And then I found this little boys soprano choir called Libra from the East End of London. Just for 20, 30 minutes, tears streaming down my face. These kids singing this angelic, 20 years ago, not only would I not have been able to appreciate that, I'd be like, turn that crap off. What? So it brings us to this whole other experiential place. I went to bed like, oh my gosh, that was beautiful. Just I felt in my heart. Brings us to our heart. Those are the experiences that we get to have on the spiritual path. Yeah.
That's what happens when the heart opens. Something really beautiful just overwhelms us. The mind is quiet. There's nothing need to be said. Well, thank you, boys. As always, it's a privilege to get to speak and share time and energy with you. And if anybody would like help with this, please check out our Facebook group, Untethered Wisdom, and we explore the works of Michael Singer, and we're all three on there with some other folks too. And if you're having difficulties with any of this with the mind, please look us up. There's somebody who cares. You're never alone. And these are really difficult spaces. And, the mind is really a hard thing to work with. So get some help. We'd love to help and point you to people who can really help. And
you can also check out the other Facebook group, Wisdom Untethered.
Thank you. That's the one. That's the one we made. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks,
Tim.
Have
a beautiful night. Bye, fellas.